when we're engaging members in what is a bit of a crisis moment. And I'm hoping that for many of you, you've probably done some planning, you've got your heads around some of the challenges already. I know some sports have been very proactive, and RSTs as well, around helping clubs kind of get a handle of what they should do in the immediate term. If you haven't done that yet, I think you probably should be making that a huge priority at the moment. But what are some of the things we're going to talk about in terms of engagement in a crisis? And I thought I'd start this with internalizing it. And I do this lots with clubs, because sometimes we forget, that we've got real human experience as well. And we might be a volunteer at a club, but we're also a member. So what do you want from your club in terms of engagement in this crisis? What are those things that you'd be yearning for? And even relate it to your job or your professional life. What are you wanting from your employers in terms of communication, clarity, all of those things? So maybe internalizing it and thinking about it, and empathizing and going, well, what are those drivers that I'd want to see in terms of engagement from my club? And I kind of categorize it down to 3 key areas, sort of catchy, but I go care, clarity, and community. And like I've said, I've seen some really good examples of that out in the field, and a number of you are doing this pretty well already. But I think in the immediate term, particularly over the next month or two, is being really strong in those 3 areas to kick things off. I just wanted to share a little story just related to that, to kind of bring to life what I'm talking about. This good-looking man, I suppose, on my right, if you don't know him, I actually mentioned him in a webinar I did for squash the other week as well. But this guy's the CE guy's name's Dan Price, of a company in the States, Gravity Payments. They're like a credit card payment sort of business. But obviously COVID hit. He faced the situation of essentially having to lay off 20% of his staff or go bust, which, hey, there's lots of those examples at the moment. But what he did, and a real sign of emotional intelligence and probably how he runs his business, is he reached out and actually went and talked to all his employees. He actually scheduled 1-hour meetings with every single employee, opened up the books, showed them the situation, and got ideas from them. Really interesting approach, and a brave approach. And actually what happened out of that was the staff took voluntary redundancies, not redundancy, sorry, voluntary, what's the word I'm looking for? Voluntary pay cuts, sorry, which essentially meant that they could operate for the next 8 to 12 months with no layoffs. So for me, this was about a boss and leader reaching out to people, and that people are probably willing to do a little bit within their means if we do that. And I think there's some parallels with how we engage in that. So I think it's a really neat example around that's engagement for me. So be like Dan. What are you doing to reach out to your people and involve them in the situation that you're going through? So if we break these down a little bit further, so that care, be open and honest. How have you reached out? Don't hide your situation. I think people will appreciate that. Obviously, it's a bit hard to do remotely, but how can you find ways like we're doing today to reach out in an authentic way that kind of shows you care and being honest about your situation and asking people what they want? Because I bet you they'll come up with some pretty good ideas. When we do that, make sure we listen. And again, I'm not telling you to suck eggs, but sometimes we're really good at just pushing our own ideas or what we think should happen as the leadership within a sport or a club. So are you showing some empathy? Are you talking to them and learning those key insights about how they want to feel and what they want? Because again, the type of ideas, maybe even the tone of what they're talking about, will give you some good indicators around maybe what you should be doing. So listen. And lastly, I mentioned this before anyway, but around working together. So involving members in solving your problems that you've got ahead. Involving your members in creating ways that you can engage well. What are their concerns around the engagement that you currently do? What are some of those engagement touch points that you could improve? And actually, if they're involved in that discussion, you might be surprised how many people maybe will come forward and maybe even offer to help. It won't be perfect, but you might get some more helpers along the way. Next one, around clarity. Pretty self-explanatory, but in a lot of ways, owning that narrative. And this is probably actually the key bit, because again, I'm sure you guys do it really well around regular communication, etc. But for me, what message are you really trying to send your members? And having some thought about that. You know, is it, hey, we're still the social hub for you guys and a place where you can interact with people? Is it about being really organized and prepared and reassuring your members that you're still going to be here? Is it that, hey, you know, we're still a lot of fun? You know, you guys joined this club because we're a great family fun club, so we're going to still carry on that ethos. So what are the messages you're trying to send your members in terms of your immediate engagement? Pretty simple, regular, and I mentioned it before. So having that basic comms plan, you know, and if you're looking as an example, you know, we're all seeing it at the moment with the government and their comms, which, you know, you can pick holes in, but at the end of the day, they're doing it at a rate that people are almost getting sick of it. We get the daily updates about everything, but that's what we need to do. And to ram home those really simple, basic messages, you know, we can all rattle off, you know, stay home and stay safe and be kind and all of those things, because the communication's been really clear, simple and regular. So again, what's the basic kind of comms plan, little one pager that maybe you put together as your club to really get across your messaging from your narrative? And then lastly, again, I'm sure you'll all be doing this, but multi-channel. And I think the key thing's the last couple of words in there around don't assume, and by what I mean by that is don't assume that everyone's going to read your emails. Don't assume that everyone's on Facebook. An example, older club members, maybe they'd really appreciate a phone call. Maybe it's more that personal touch. And yes, I understand that might be a little bit more work trying to cover multi-channel. It's really easy just to put a note up on your website and jobs are good in and done. But I think those clubs that go that little bit extra and maybe make it multi-channel and do that little bit of above and beyond will get better kickback from their members.